Have you ever been using a marker and it bleeds right through the paper and gets on the next page behind it, and you're like, I have to skip a page in my sketchbook now. Or, for that matter, have you ever gone to scan something that you've drawn in your sketchbook and colored with marker, and you find that the page behind it is just showing right through the paper? That when you scan it, it looks all dirty and bad? Well, I know I have. And that got me to thinking, maybe I can make an art challenge out of this. So, in today's episode, that is exactly what we've done. I'm calling it the Bleed Through Challenge. What I did was I used exclusively Sharpie marker, and I wanted to try and create a piece that allows me to have different shades using exclusively solid black. So the first thing I did was I experimented on some just basic file paper to see how many layers of paper I could see the marker through. One thing I found quite quickly with this challenge, though, is that while my human eyes could see the marker bleeding through the paper, my camera is not so great at picking it out. But I was able to have about 3 layers of paper that I could see visually. It looked to me like the opacity of each paper increased dramatically. Seeing the black through the paper meant that each sheet increased the opacity dramatically. So if I had one layer, it was quite dark. The next layer, it was cut by, I should say, about 60%. And the third layer was barely visible with my human eyes, and the camera didn't pick it up at all. Actually, the camera didn't like this experiment even a little bit and didn't pick up any of them. But that got me to thinking, maybe this kind of layers aren't the right way to go. So I scrapped the multiple pages approach, and I started looking at the back of the piece of paper that I'd been working on. Now, when you're working with Sharpie, it bleeds through the paper, and I've noticed this before, and I thought, this cuts the opacity by about 50%. This is something I can work with. So I experimented around with that for a little while, and I was reasonably happy with the results. If I use the Sharpie marker to do the darkest shapes on the front of the paper, then have the second half of the paper on the other side use the bleed through to create the 50% opacity, that gives me 2 layers right there with just one piece of paper. Then, going in even further, if I add a second sheet of paper behind the first, with that original 60% opacity on the white for the first paper, it gives me 3 possible layers. And I experimented with 4 layers using the back of the second piece of paper, but I found that it was just not capable of coming all the way through. So it was going to be 2 pieces of paper and 3 possible layers. With my method finally set, I started in on the final piece. For this, I've decided to go with this famous image of Nosferatu, because it's a nice black and white image, and also because it plays in with the theme of bleeding through. I traced the image onto 2 separate sheets of paper so that I could get those 3 layers that I wanted, and then I started right in on those heavy blacks, setting out solid areas of shadow for where I knew it was going to be requiring very heavy black lines. Flipping the paper over, I went in on the back using the same method of filling in those solid areas of shadow for where I wanted my midtones. And in order to accomplish this, I had to flip the image on Photoshop so that I could make sure that I was staying consistent with the shadows and the highlights for the second layer that I wanted to use. Finally, I went in on the second piece of paper using the front of the paper to create the final layers of solid black. These, when they shine through the white of the paper in front, actually create the 3-level image. Adding the 2 layers together and backlighting it gives me the final effect for the piece, and I'm very happy with how this came out overall. If you guys want to try this yourselves, make sure that you put something down on the table before you start, because the whole point is the markers are going to bleed through your paper and will also bleed onto your table. Overall, I'd say this is a very fun art challenge, and if you want to give it a shot, go ahead and post your pictures on our Reddit at r/CreantWorld using the Flare Art Challenge. And that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you enjoyed this art challenge, go ahead and hit that like button. And for more of our art challenges in the future, subscribe for a new art challenge every other week. But until next time, I'll see you later.